Welcome back, everybody. This is week 10, day 2, the very last video of our RPS at Home for Life Science before the summer hits. This video is going to be focused on adaptations in natural selection in LS13A. So here's the agenda for day 2. First, of course, you're going to pull out those student workbooks. Make sure that you are keeping track with all of your thoughts and all of your work. And then you're going to scroll down to day 2 of that workbook. Third, I want you to look back at this video when you're ready. Fourth, we're going to be reviewing on adaptations, as well as learning about natural selection using the videos on the next slide. Sorry about that typo. Oh, and then our day 3 tasks, the last 2 assignments for the entire year. First, a writing prompt on the question, why does biodiversity matter to you? And then I have a natural selection and adaptations Legends of Learning playlist for you guys to continue working with, to play games with. That's going to be open throughout the entire week. So let us get going. Before watching our video, I want to go over one scientific term and its definition because you are going to hear this within the video. The word theory is going to be a word that pops up. A theory is an explanation of a natural phenomenon, so something that happens in the natural world of ours that can be repeatedly tested in accordance to the scientific method. Remember that in science, new evidence and information can be gathered, and these theories can be modified or rejected later in the future. This is what you should be looking at for your day 2 worksheets. You have 2 pages. First one's going to be on the adaptations video by Discovery Education, and then the second video is going to be on natural selection, also by Discovery Education. Make sure that you are answering those review questions first before you start the video. These questions are going to be about terms or scientific concepts that you've learned already in school, or something that I've already posted within this video for you to write down as a definition or an explanation. Now, after you've completed both of the charts, I want you to answer this critical thinking question. Now for the first video on adaptations.
What are adaptations? We know that living things change and that our world is always changing around us. Darwin's theory of natural selection tells us that over many generations, species develop certain traits in response to changes in their environment. These traits help them to survive and are called adaptations. In order to understand adaptations, let's start with a basic example. We know that mangoes and bananas grow only in warm tropical environments. Environments are the conditions in which something lives. For mangoes and bananas, their ideal growing environment requires a certain amount of rain, warm temperatures, and a steady amount of sunshine. After all, we don't find mangoes and bananas growing in Antarctica, but Antarctica's environment, rain, cold temperatures, and sunshine that ranges from only a few hours a day in the summer to 24 hours a day in the winter is perfect for other living things like penguins. And if we put penguins in a different environment like the tropics, they would not be happy, even with all the bananas and mangoes. Instead, they would be very unhappy because they have developed adaptations to keep them warm in Antarctica. They have downy feathers that trap warm air next to their skin like a down jacket and have a layer of blubber or fat under their skin to keep them warm even during the harshest winter weather. These adaptations help the penguin live and thrive in its Antarctic environment, but would make penguins much too hot to survive well in hotter climates. Sometimes, when an environment changes, the entire balance of an ecosystem is upset. Physical and behavioral traits that support successful survival and reproduction in the new environment becomes more common in a species, while traits that don't support survival become less common. As more of the species develop the successful traits, these traits become adaptations. Adaptations can help a living thing fit into its environment. Sometimes, the long-term survival of species depend on these adaptive features being passed from generation to generation. The peppered moth is a great example of an animal that adapted to change in its environment. The peppered moth comes in 2 varieties, light and dark. The dark moths are easier to see when they are resting on trees. This makes them easier prey for birds and other predators. The light-colored moths, on the other hand, blend in well with the bark of the tree and can hide more easily from predators. Their light color is an adaptation that helps them survive more easily in their environment. So, if we went for a hike in the woods, we would expect to see more light-colored moths than dark-colored moths, because over time, the characteristics of the surviving member of a species will become predominant. And this is the way it was. One study of peppered moths in London in the early 1880s showed that 98% of peppered moths had light-colored bodies, while 2% had dark-colored bodies. But what happens when the environment changes? There was a dramatic change in the environment around London in the late 1880s. The Industrial Revolution was taking place, so many more factories were being built. These factories relied on burning coal for energy and created a lot of pollution. Trees in and around London became covered with black soot. Suddenly, the black-peppered moth had the adaptation that would help them survive better. Now they could blend in with the dark trees. It was the light moths who were more easily seen and eaten by predators. Now that more dark moths were surviving and reproducing with each other, more dark moths were created. By 1895, the peppered moth population had changed dramatically. Only 5% of the population were the light-colored moth, where 95% were the dark-colored moths. This was quite a turnaround. And, by the way, now that we are more focused on reducing pollution in the world, studies are showing that the light-colored moth population is starting to rise again. These moths sure are a species that is good at surviving by adapting to changes in its environment. I guess in my search for the perfect dog to rescue, I will have to look for a dog with adaptations that make it a great runner. Let's review what we've just learned about adaptations. Question 1. What happens to physical and behavioral traits that support survival? A. They become more common. B. They become less common. C. They don't change at all. D. None of the above. The correct answer is A. Traits that support survival become more common over time. Question 2. After the Industrial Revolution, the dark peppered moths made up what percentage of the peppered moth population? A. 10%. B. 25%. C. 75%. D. 95%. If you answer D, you know that the dark moths made up 95% of the population by 1895. Here's question 3. What is causing a rise in the light-colored moth population? A. A reduction in pollution. B. The planting of new trees. C. An increase in the amount of rain. D. All of the above. The correct answer is A. A reduction in pollution is causing an increase in light-colored peppered moths.
So that was our review on adaptations. And to reiterate, adaptation is a physical or a behavioral trait that an organism has that allows it to survive better in its environment. And not only to survive, but to be able to reproduce to the next generation as well, to pass on their traits. Now this next video is on natural selection.
Scientists have been able to use the fossil record to compare species in today's world to similar species from long ago. In many cases, scientists can see that some species have evolved or changed in order to survive as their surroundings have changed. This theory about how species evolve was made famous by the English...
Before we continue, remember the word theory. A theory is an explanation of a natural phenomenon in this world on the basis of science. The explanation of a concept, just like the theory that we are about to speak of.
Darwin lived from 1809 to 1882. He loved animals and spent his entire life studying them. In 1831, Darwin began a 5-year voyage aboard the HMS Beagle. He was the ship's naturalist and observed and collected a wide variety of plant and animal specimens as the ship made its voyage to the coasts and islands around South America and then Australia. In his travels, Darwin noticed that no matter where they lived around the world, many species had strong similarities. He also noticed that although species had these similarities, they also had differences based on the environment they lived in. One species that caught Darwin's eye was the finch bird of the Galapagos Island. Darwin was fascinated with finches and had noticed them in many of the places that the HMS Beagle had traveled. He observed that although the birds were all finches, their beaks were different shapes depending on where they lived. Darwin began to study the finches' beaks. He realized that the beaks of the finches matched the type of food available on each different island. For example, on some islands, the finches had skinny, pointed beaks. Darwin noticed that on these islands, the finches ate insects. Skinny, pointed beaks helped the finches pick tiny insects out of the dirt and sand. On other islands, the finches had short, sharp beaks. These finches ate the hard fruits that were available on their island. So, their short, hard beaks helped them get through the tough skins of the fruits. Darwin's studies led him to develop the idea that these differences among finch species happened as the birds adapted or changed to their specific environments. Darwin believed that these changes took place slowly over a long period of time. As Darwin thought more about this idea, he began to describe a scientific process that he called natural selection. This theory states that in any environment, plants and animals from the same species will show some variations or differences in their physical characteristics.
Think about how that plays a part with the last video and our concepts that we know about adaptations, and how there are different adaptations in the same species of organism. Like in the peppered moths, we have our darker colored moths, the black ones all around, and then you have your white colored moths with the little speckle of black, but it's predominantly white. And see how those variations, that natural selection between those organisms within that same population, within that same species, can lead to something. Think about that. I'm gonna keep it broad.
Stronger species who adapt successfully to their changing environments are more likely to survive and pass their characteristics on to their offspring. Over long periods of time, these characteristics will become predominant among the surviving members of the species. Weaker species who cannot adapt to changes in the environment will be unable to evolve and reproduce and will eventually die out. This is why some islands had finches with skinny beaks, while other islands had finches with short, sharp beaks. In it, Darwin also proposed the idea that all species, including humans, evolved from common ancestors because of the process of natural selection. This idea that man evolved along with apes and monkeys was controversial because it went against the religious beliefs of many people. However, Darwin's theory of evolution is now widely accepted as the best scientific explanation of.
And then let me pause it there. Just as a reminder, it's a scientific explanation of how these organisms came to be. It's a theory, and we're going to continue speaking about it as a theory in science.
Of how life on Earth works. Further scientific investigation, including experimentation and DNA research, has proven Darwin's theory of evolution by natural selection to be based in fact. We have been learning so much about Charles Darwin and natural selection. Let's review. Question 1. What kind of bird did Darwin study aboard the HMS Beagle? A. Robin. B. Dove. C. Bluebird. D. Finch. The correct answer is D. Darwin studied the finch.
I'm going to stop the video there because the last two questions you don't really need to know about. What you do need to know is the theory of natural selection and how that plays a part with our adaptations of organisms of the same species that look different, just like the peppered moths within the last video. So, let's continue on. One of the last few assignments is a writing prompt. What I want you to do is answer this question. Why does biodiversity matter to you? So to end the school year right, amidst this pandemic, the reason why I wanted to do this, or the reason why I wanted this to be the last or one of the last assignments is to push the importance of reading and push the importance of writing, to push the importance of educating yourselves about the issues that surround you every day. And it gives you the opportunity to practice how to express your thoughts within those issues. Now, what we're talking about now, and what I want you to read and write about, is biodiversity. In order for you to complete your short essays on the question why biodiversity matters to you, I provided a link to access an article that I want you to read from Newsella in your student workbook. It's going to be the very last page. All you have to do is scroll down, and then you're going to see it there. With this, you can get a better understanding about why it's so important, and then you can put it in your own words, how that affects us as individuals, how that affects us as human beings, how that affects us as a world. So why is biodiversity so important? And then lastly, you're going to see the link to your Natural Selections Legends of Learning playlist. It's actually going to take you to the login page for Legends of Learning. And then the teacher code, as always, is going to be all caps, Nunez J1. Now for the very last slide, for your very last RPS at Home Life Science video. Guys, kids, parents, families, I really hope that you guys have a great summer. I know that this is a very different way of ending things this school year. I know we didn't get to all see each other. I know we're not all in our schools, around our friends and our coworkers and our other teachers and faculty, but we are hanging in there. We are decreasing the curve. We are doing the right thing here. So to continue this, I really hope that you guys have a safe and wonderful summer filled with fun, filled with memories and experiences. So please, please, please go out there and enjoy yourselves. Y'all have a good one. I'll see you guys next year. Bye-bye.